For starters, my parents have always taught me how to be independent. I live 30-ish minutes away from NYC by train, so I was taught to not be afraid of these subway systems. I quickly learned how to find my way around NYC and my town in Jersey. I know, don't judge me. Via public transportation, and I was always checking in with my parents, whether I was going to practice or a movie with my friends, so it was never a big deal. Anyway, a few weeks prior to the incident, the internet in our house wasn't working and I needed the computer to finish some research paper. Since the library was closed, it was a weekend, typical of my town. My older brother took me to this internet cafe a few blocks away from our house. While there, my brother was talking to his friend Charles, and he had introduced us both. Little did I know this Charles guy, he was maybe 17 years old, was about to save my life. Oh, and I almost forgot an important detail. This cafe was on the main street of my town, and there was a bus stop a block away from the cafe. A few weekends after meeting Charles, my friends invited me to go bowling in the city. My parents said okay. I was 14, so obviously I'd asked for permission, and was on my way around noon. We bowled, got some pizza, talked about my friend's new puppy, typical girl things. Everything was fine until I was making my way back home. 3 p.m. There are delays with the subway system. Instead of waiting it out, I decided that I could just take another subway home. It would drop me off at the Newark Penn Station, and I would be one bus ride away from home. No problem. 3:15 p.m. I'm on the subway and I noticed that this older man, he's in his mid to late 20s, is staring at me. Creeps me out, but it's nothing new in NYC, so I ignore him. 3:50 p.m. I arrive at Newark Penn Station, and this man sees me get up to go. He makes eye contact, smiles, and he hurries behind me. Now mind you, I'm a young, small girl at the time, so I'm an easy target. He's creepy, so I decided to walk fast and get lost in the crowd. Doors open, and I speed walk through the people. This dude must have had 20/20 vision because as soon as I had arrived at my bus stop, a fast 10-minute walk, he was right behind me. 4 p.m. I'm sitting next to an elderly-looking lady at the bus stop. The creepy dude is pacing back and forth less than 10 feet away from me. He's looking at me, smiling and pacing the floor. Every part of my young body is saying, "Run now, he's bad news." But there was nowhere to go. And somehow sitting next to this older lady made me feel safer. I take my phone out to text my mom. It's dead, wonderful. Thankfully, more people have arrived at this bus stop and I feel better. There are witnesses around. He can't do anything, but he's still staring and pacing back and forth. 4:15 p.m. The bus arrives, finally. I quickly get in and sit as close as possible to the driver. I don't know why I didn't tell the bus driver what was happening. I was young, scared, and naive, and I didn't want to burden the driver. It's stupid, I now know. My stop is the very last one, or so I thought. The creepy dude has to get off on the bus before me. There's no way that he's going to stay until the end. Many bus stops later, the guy's still on the bus. He did this creepy thing. Whenever the bus would stop, he would get up with everyone else, and instead of getting off the bus, he would sit closer and closer to the front. There are fewer and fewer people on the bus, so I realize that this guy is getting off whenever I get off the bus. This means that if I get off at my stop, he can follow me home, find out where I live, or maybe I'll never get home. 5 p.m. There are only 2 bus stops separating me and my house. This guy, a lady, and I are the last ones inside the bus at this point. I decide that I'm getting out early because I'm not having this guy know where I live at. I get off a bus stop early. He sees me and follows me. I pick up speed and he picks up speed. Screw it. I run and he runs after me. Mid-panic, I remember the cafe. It closes soon, and I'm only a block away. I run for my life to the cafe and this guy is right behind me. As I'm approaching the cafe, I see Charles outside locking up the place. He sees me and he knows that something is wrong. I guess he saw the fear in my face and this older dude running after young me. I get to him and Charles immediately pushes me inside the cafe, and he locks the door behind us, therefore locking this creep outside. My heart is pounding. I quickly tell Charles that this random guy has been following me across 3 towns and that I was scared. He calls the cops. The guy is staring inside the cafe and I'm staring back at him, protected by the locked, yet clear glass door. I had to remember him. Creepy dude smiles and walks away as if nothing had just happened. Little did I know that Charles' uncle was a cop in our town. A few minutes later, the cop shows up. After describing him in vivid detail, it takes them minutes to catch this creep, still walking down the main street. We later find out this creepy guy had a warrant out for his arrest, for armed robbery and had prior accounts of assault. Had it not been for Charles, I don't know what would have happened to me that day. Thanks for saving my life. And no, this did not deter me from public transportation or from exploring the city alone. My parents did freak out and they got me maced though. As an adult, I travel all over the world, sometimes alone. But I'm hyper aware of my surroundings because of what had happened at 14. My mom's dog, Punky, R.I.P., was a very sweet loving dog. She was an ESA dog but trained to be a service dog for PTSD before she had lost her leg. I had never seen her ever get aggressive with anyone in the entire 12 years that she lived. She never growled or nipped at anyone, and she had no sense of smell, so she loved all animals and people. A real gentle giant among our little terriers at 60 pounds. What I'm getting at here was that her barking at something and being aggressive was so wildly uncharacteristic that I only saw it once. I, an 11-year-old female, was at home with my siblings, a 2-year-old male and a 6-year-old female. My then stepdad was at work and my mom had ran up to the gas station to grab a pack of cigarettes. It was only about a mile or 2 away from us. For reference, we lived in a 2-bedroom trailer in the middle of the woods, on a dead-end road at the time, and you had to really make an effort to get down our road, find our house, navigate down our rickety driveway, and find the door. I'm sitting at the computer having a grand time watching YouTube, when all of a sudden all of our dogs, about 2 Boston Terriers and 1 Chihuahua, perk up. They bark a few times, and start investigating down the hallway. My siblings were napping in the bedroom at the end of the hall at the time, so I figured they just stirred and had scared the dogs. But then Punky sits up suddenly, stands up on the couch and puffs out her chest. Her ears are perked up and her fur was standing on end. Her tail straight up and then she barks. Loudly. I mean, the bark booms through the living room and echoes around. And all of a sudden she lunges off the couch and goes tearing down the hallway. I'm already on edge because I don't think that I've ever heard her bark. She's a Benzinji mix, so her bark is more of a baying sound, but this was a big, loud, alert bark. I stand up and go to look down the hallway, ready to fight off what I'm assuming is a shadow monster in the hallway, based on how the dogs are acting. But then I hear it. A knocking. We didn't get visitors because of how weird our house was location-wise, so my 11-year-old mind had no clue what to do here. The only people who showed up were family and they didn't knock, so I slowly walked towards the door. The knock drew the attention of the dogs and they came running back down the hallway, all except for Punky, and I felt better with our 3 yappy dogs in the room with me, even if they were all about the size of New York City sewer rats. I opened the door just a bit, and standing on our porch is the sketchiest man that I think I've ever seen. I can still picture him perfectly. He was a really thin, taller man with dark hair and a sunken face, bags under his eyes, and his half-managed hair. Sort of like he just gave it a quick brush and then figured it was good enough. Everything about him seemed just a little too thin, a little too shallow, and his clothes were all off too. They were nice, but fake nice, you know. Like a clean, newer-looking t-shirt and new jeans. But he had what looked like a suit jacket on. All his clothes were dark too, despite the fact that it was summer in Texas and the weather was definitely into the hundreds that day. He also had this plain, unlabeled bottle in his hand. It looked like the label had been covered up and taped over. I stared up at him in confusion because I definitely didn't know this man, and I asked what he wanted. He smiled at me in this way that was way too fake, like this exaggerated and forced grin, and he spoke in the same voice that retail workers do. "Oh, hey there, kiddo, I'm trying to sell this here carpet cleaner," and he shakes the bottle at me. "Mind if I come in and show you how good it works?" Alarms are going off in my head because he just seems so off. Looking back with an adult perspective, the fact that he didn't ask if my parents were home is unnerving, because he probably knew they weren't and that's why he was there in the first place. I should have told him to get off our property, that I would have to go get my mom, something except what I did say, but I didn't. Instead, I just shook my head and said, "No, we don't have carpet." "Well, it works on other things too." And he took a big step towards the door, and he shook the bottle at me. I start to freak out and think to close the door, but the thing is that our front door didn't even lock. It's a small town and a hard-to-access home. We never needed a lock, so it was basically useless. I'm sure there's something very wrong about to happen, and I'm terrified as I think about what to do in the few seconds that I think I have before it does happen, when all of a sudden I hear it. Punky had crept up from the hallway, lowered towards the ground with her teeth bared and snarling like she was feral. She had slobber dripping from her mouth and her ears were down and she was ready to pounce. The guy hears it too, and as I look towards Punky, she tries to lunge past me, and I just barely catch her with my leg as she tries her hardest to duck past me and attack this guy. He freaks out and runs off the porch without another word, booking it down the driveway as I let Punky out along with the rest of our dogs and they start chasing him. Our small dogs chase him down the driveway and stop about halfway, barking and jumping about. But Punky stops just on the porch and watches him with her ears perked, just staring in the distance until he disappears. I swear that I saw someone join up with him, running when he got onto the road. The second that he disappeared, Punky's entire body language changed when she went back to being the sweet dog that I knew. No barking nor growling, just laying around, mouth and throat covered in slobber still. I realize my siblings are still down the hall and I run to check on them. And when I get to the bedroom, they were still sleeping soundly. But the bedroom window was wide open. The curtains were pushed all to one side and the items on the dresser in front of the window were all shoved around. Somebody had tried to climb through the window. No doubt in my mind about it. From what I can gather, the bedroom window was visible from the couch where Punky was sleeping. So I think someone was trying to climb through the window before Punky went after them, and it scared them off, and the man at the door was meant to distract me. They definitely didn't expect Punky, a bigger dog, because most of the time she was with my mom inside, while our small dogs were the ones that saw public eye more often. I don't know what they intended to do, but after my mom got home, she took all of us to my aunt's house, and on the way there, we saw the man walking up somebody else's driveway. Men in plural, because we watched a second one split off to wait by the road. I moved a lot growing up. By the time freshman year of high school came around, I had moved about 7 or so times and was about a year and a half into my most recent move. I had found a pretty close friend group of friends in middle school and we all went to high school together. I met him through one of those closer friends. They were in a band together, and even though he was almost 4 years older than us, we welcomed him into our group. Sam was easily twice my size, tall and heavy-set, and originally kind of intimidating. Although I was never afraid of large men before him. Lesson learned. I had a kind of a bad home life and I would spend as much time as I could at school. Sometimes hanging around the school campus until about 6 or 7 at night with this friend group. The 3 of us lived in the same direction and we would walk the half-hour trip together until our paths split. One slightly colder evening, Sam offered to walk me home since the others had gone home already. I just thought that he was being a gentleman. He mentioned something from a previous move when he had lived in California. He didn't walk a friend home and something horrible had happened, so we left it at that, and I let him walk me home. We got a lot closer after that. We bonded over both living in California and we traded numbers. He would message me late into the night about his depression, and I just wanted to help him. A few months later, he tried asking me out. It was this big romantic gesture. He had learned a Disney song on the ukulele and sang to me in the cafeteria. But I was already dating somebody at the time, and when I turned him down for it, he got angry. A freaky, quiet, twitchy kind of angry. I felt so bad. After that, I started seeing him everywhere. We were still friends and we would still hang out in groups, but I would pass him on the street walking somewhere, and a few minutes later I would see that he had changed directions and he had started to follow me. He would walk me to classes by following me in a passing period at a distance. I started to minimize the group time that we would spend together, and he would follow me more then. I had friends that meet me at each class and walk me to my next one because I felt unsafe because of him, and he knew where I lived at. And then he started to talk, not to me but to mutual friends about that one girl in California who he tried to walk home. At first, he had just shared my name, some crazy coincidence. And then she had the same brown curly hair and blue eyes. And every time that he rambled on about her, she became more and more like me. And then he said what had happened. Over literal weeks, this fantasy had evolved. They were walking home and they were jumped by some guy with a knife. It was a robbery gone wrong on her birthday, January 24th, my birthday. And she had died horribly and he couldn't react in time. She had blood out in his arms. Sarah, who had brown curly hair, blue eyes. My name, my birthday, and sounds just like me and bled out in his arms. Each retelling added more and more detail, and this guy with this sick fantasy about my death would follow me around, and he knew where I lived. My boyfriend at the time and I weren't in a healthy relationship, but I stayed as close to him as I could whenever I could, because if the worst happened, I knew for sure he could throw a punch. I never felt safe at school or in our little town walking home from school in the dark. One day at school, he had a breakdown, freaked out, and he ran out of the school in a panic. I was sent after him and found him curled up on the floor. I got closer. I knew about his anxiety and depression, and my safety aside, I wanted to make sure that he was okay. It was then that he told me this horrifying story that I had been hearing from mutual friends with added detail. We had been walking home from a concert in California and we passed a dark alley and a homeless man came out with a rusty knife and asked for anything valuable. I fumbled for my phone. I didn't have anything else on me, and he thought that I was calling the police. He stabbed me once, twice, and again, and Sam stood there terrified. He saw red and grabbed a broken glass bottle in my body, and he had attacked the homeless man. He killed him with his own knife. He told me that he had killed someone. It didn't matter how messed up he was anymore. I didn't care if it was a fantasy or real. I didn't care how it would affect his mental health anymore. I wanted to go to the police. I was scared for my life. My friends convinced me to go to the school counselor first, and that morning we went and told them everything. The stalking, the stories, how he had admitted to murder and that was the reason they had moved from California. How I was afraid for my life and wanted to call the police. The counselor didn't take us seriously. She went to the principal, and the principal, not a mental health expert, called Sam in to talk about the accusations. The principal then informed me that he did not think that Sam had any kind of mental illness or that I was in any danger, and that was that. I lost faith in adults and gave up on going to the police. I stayed with my friend, walking me in between classes, hiding behind my boyfriend, and looking behind me every step of my walk home that year. The counselors ended up gaslighting us to the point where this all feels like a fever dream now, and I would think it's made up if it weren't for my journal entries, recording the events and my growing panic, and the similar stories from my friend group.